You can all take your time getting yourselves ready, but today blocks may be handy and a cushion of some sort may be handy. And anything else you like practicing with. So whenever you're ready, you can come onto your mat and just take a moment to shake a little bit, to just kind of transition into practice, to transition away from the rest of the world and everything else that's been going on, and just kind of shake everything off and come into whatever space you're in. Maybe take a few deep breaths, and you could start by shaking your arms. You could shake your legs. You could shake your body, shake your head gently. But if you need to unmute, you can unmute. You have something to say, or if you have a question. And if you're done shaking, that's fine. And if you're still shaking, take your time and just kind of slow down, come back to center, and take a moment to just stand on your mat in mountain. So your feet could be together or apart. And think about rolling your shoulders back a little, engaging a little through your thighs, kind of centering yourself so that you're stacking your head over your shoulders, over your hips, over your knees, over your ankles. Maybe take a really deep inhale and breathe it out slowly. Maybe do that a couple of times. And then as you're ready, make your way down onto your mat. And if you have a cushion to sit on, or a couple of cushions to sit on, even, you could sit on blocks. You could prop your hips up using whatever you have available. And if kneeling works better, that's fine. And if sitting in a chair works better, you can do that too. So start by sitting up pretty tall, and then start rolling your left shoulder back and around, and then roll your right shoulder back and around. And then continue rolling one shoulder at a time. And you can make this, you can keep it small if it feels right to keep it small. You can make it a bigger movement. Think about leading from your shoulder. And if you want to make it a bigger movement, you could start kind of lifting and swimming your arms, almost like in this backstroke kind of movement. So it might look like this. It might look like this. Try using this movement in a way that feels right to you today. So notice what you're feeling and notice how you can make this work in your body. So you might be using it to get a stretch, to start to warm your body up. You might be using it just to sort of feel how are you feeling right now? And as always, make sure you're moving at your own pace. So if you want to move slowly, you can move slowly. If you want to move more quickly, you can move more quickly. And really pay attention to where you're feeling this. So you might be able to feel it through your side body. Probably you'll feel something in your shoulders. Just rolling one shoulder and then the other, with the option of adding in these kind of arm rotations. And again, you could be sitting on the floor, you could be sitting in a chair, you could be standing up for this. So try it a few more times on each arm in this direction. And then you can begin moving in the opposite direction. So pausing and coming back to center, and then rolling one shoulder forward and then the opposite shoulder forward. Again, as small a movement or as large a movement as you like. And you might start out small, just kind of sensing what's going on in your body. And gradually, maybe you decide to make it a larger movement. And maybe you decide to keep it smaller. And again, think about leading with your shoulders. So you're kind of pulling your body a little bit forward and then a little bit back. You might check in with your breath and see that you're kind of breathing fully. Make sure you're moving in a way that allows you to breathe with some ease. Maybe do that a couple more times on each side, paying attention to where you're feeling it. And then as you're ready, come back to center and just notice what that feels like now that you kind of twisted your body around a little like that. And as you're ready, if you need to refresh your seat, if you're sitting, you can do that. And if you're not sitting, if it works for you to come sit on the floor, go ahead and do that. Maybe prop your hips up. And from here, bring your feet together in front of you and allow your knees to come out to the side. And if this is particularly uncomfortable, if you have blocks or cushions, you could place them underneath your knees here, if that's useful for you. And from here, bring your fingertips to the ground and think about finding this hip hinge here. So your legs come into your body and your body comes up right there. Think about finding as much of a 90-degree angle as you can find. So some length through your spine. And you could stay here in this version of Baddha Konasana. And if it feels right to you, you might also start to tip forward, hinging from your hips, maybe bringing your hands forward to hold your ankles or interlacing your hands around your toes or placing your hands on the floor, whatever feels right. And wherever you are in this posture, just make sure it's the right place for you today. Try coming back to your breath, just noticing, am I able to breathe freely here? And if not, don't feel like you have to force yourself into this version that you're in. You can ease up in whatever way feels right, whether that's sitting up a little more, propping your hips up a little more. Notice if you can feel a stretch anywhere. And if you're folded forward, you can come back up and then bring your knees up step your feet out a little wider and place the soles of your feet on the ground. Place your hands on the ground a little behind you, so you're kind of leaning on your hands, and then drop your knees to one side to the degree that they want to go to that side. So you don't have to force anything. You're just finding some movement in your hip here. And then draw them back up and drop them to the other side. So you're making these little windshield wiper movements with your legs. And try that a number of times. So you can move at your own pace. You can go slowly or quickly. You can hold in any position that feels like it's useful. And you might notice that as you move your legs back and forth, your butt might start kind of walking you forward, and that's okay. You can just reset, push yourself back a little if you need to. But just really start to check in and see what you're feeling in this part of your body. So you might feel it in your hips. You might feel it in your low back, maybe throughout your thighs, maybe in your ankles. And probably lots of other places. The next time your knees are up, pause there. And then see if it's possible to bring yourself into this position where your knees are down towards the floor. You can have yourself leaning back on your hand, but your one leg is coming out at sort of a 90-degree angle. It's bent at the knee, and your other knee is coming out more to the side and at this kind of 90-degree angle. And just pause there and notice what that feels like. If you want to place a block under your hand for some support, you can do that. And begin to turn your body towards the knee that's pointing out in front of you. And just take a couple of breaths here. See if it's possible to sit up a little bit taller. And this is a lot of flexion in your hips and in your knees. So if it's uncomfortable, propping yourself up so that you have a little something more under your hips may be helpful. And then bring your hand, the same hand that if your right knee is in front of you, bring your right hand onto the floor or to a block next to or beside you. And see what it's like to lift your hips up a little bit, if that's possible. And if it doesn't work, that's fine. You can stay here really focusing on feeling whatever sensation is there. But if it does work to lift your hips up, you might try doing that a couple of times and just finding a little bit of movement here. See if there's possibly a stretch anywhere. If you feel anything working. And then come back down if you're up and bring your hands behind you, bring your knees back up and try that on the other side. So if it was your right knee first, it'll be your left knee out in front of you, bent at this 90-degree angle, and your other knee behind you coming out to the side, kind of at a 90-degree angle. And again, you can be leaning back on your hand. Let's see if it's possible to turn your body towards that front knee and sit up however tall you can sit up. And just notice where you're feeling it. Don't try to force it, but notice if you can feel this kind of sensation, whatever is happening right now in your hips, maybe in your back. And then if you would like to try the same thing here, you might place your hand behind or beside you in a way that feels supportive and begin trying to lift your hips up to any degree. So you'll be possibly pressing down with your knees, lifting up with your hips, but only if that works for you. Both options are great. Both options are offering lots of work for your hips to kind of explore this mobility here. So again, either thinking about sitting up tall or seeing what it's like to lift your hips up. And then take your time coming back down if you're up, and bring your knees back to center. From here, extend your legs out into what for you feels like a comfortable, sustainable, wide-legged position. So your knees could be bent as much as needed here, but they bring a little flex into your feet. And bring your fingertips again to the ground for some support. Think about lengthening up through your spine here. Just kind of sitting up tall, finding this hinge right here where your legs come into your body. And then decide for yourself if staying here is going to be the best position for you, or if maybe walking your hands forward and hinging from the hips. If that works for you, you can try that. And another option, if sitting like this really is uncomfortable, you might prop your hips up a little more and even scoot yourself up so that you have a wall behind your back for support. So whatever option you're trying, this is Upavishta Konasana. See if you can breathe pretty fully. Long, slow inhales and long, slow exhales. And if you notice that your mind is wandering, you might try to tune in instead to whatever you're feeling in your body. Notice if you're holding tension anywhere that you don't need to be holding tension right now. Sometimes just noticing helps that release a little bit. You don't have to feel like you need to try and change anything. Just see if it's possible to be with whatever is there. If you're folded forward, you can come up now. And then bring your fingertips to the floor again. And from here, kind of find a little bit of floppiness in your legs and just see what it's like to allow them to kind of gently flop back and forth. So you get a little bit of rotation at your hips, and maybe let your muscles kind of just loosen up here. And if you need to bring your legs in a little bit more, if that's more comfortable, you can do that. And then jiggle your legs a little bit, just kind of bend your knees and straighten them a few times. And then bring your knees in and bring yourself into a kneeling position on your mat, facing the short edge. If you need to cushion under your knees, you can place a cushion under there. You might fold your mat up, double it up, if that works for you. If you don't have a cushion, and if you have blocks, you can place them on either side of your mat so they're in reach. And once you're all set up, you might grab those blocks if you have them. And if you don't, that's okay. If you have furniture around, you can grab hold of that. But step one of your legs forward. Maybe try your left leg if you haven't stepped one forward. Yeah, so starting with your left leg, come into this low lunge position. And if you have blocks, you can have your hands on your blocks. If you have a piece of furniture, you could have your hands on that. Or if it works, you could have your hands on the floor. So from here, start to lean your hips forward a little bit and then lean them back a little. And find a little bit of movement here in your hips, just gently exploring whatever sensation is there, only going so far as it feels right to you. So you're not forcing things, you're not looking for pain, you're just looking for sensation. Maybe something will feel good, but if something hurts, definitely back off from whatever that is. And the next time your hips are forward, pause there. Think about pressing down through your front foot and pulling that foot a little bit towards your body, maybe squeezing it in towards your back knee a little bit. And just notice, can you feel a stretch anywhere? And then check in with your right quad. So your back quadricep, the front of your back thigh. You might try here to lift your back foot up to any degree and notice if that brings a little stretch into the front of your quad. And if so, that's great. And if not, that's okay. And if it doesn't feel good, you can drop it down. And another option would be to take your left hand, if it feels available to you, reach back and possibly reach back towards that back foot, maybe take hold of that back foot, but certainly not forcing that. But that would be another way to find a stretch for your quadricep here. And if you're already feeling a stretch through your quad, just take a moment wherever you are to breathe and feel that sensation. And then if you have your foot in hand, you can let it go, come back to center, send your hips back a little. And if you can feel a stretch through your extended left leg, the back of that leg, pause when you start to feel that and gently just sort of hold that posture. So your leg might be out in front of you straight. Maybe your heel is on the ground. Maybe your toes are on the ground. Maybe your leg is still bent. Wherever you are, just see if you can find some sort of sensation in your hamstring without forcing your body into something uncomfortable or painful. So this is a version of Ardha Hanumanasana. And again, your hands might be on blocks, they might be on the floor, they might be holding onto a piece of furniture. Wherever you are, make sure you can breathe freely. And then you can start to bend a little more through that knee, come back into that low lunge. If you have blocks, place your hands on the blocks. And then step that left leg back so you're back in a kneeling position again. You might pause here for a moment and just notice what you're feeling through your legs before then moving on to the second side. So whenever you're ready, you can step your right leg forward. So you might again place your hands on blocks or furniture or the floor. Step that right leg forward and come into a low lunge. And then just gently start exploring a little bit of movement. So leaning your hips forward and then back. And it doesn't have to be a lot of movement. It can be whatever feels right. So no worrying about what things look like or how much movement there is. Then when you're ready, come back into the lunge position so that your front knee is bent. Lean your hips forward a bit and see if you can find a stretch through your back thigh. So the same options here. You can stay with your foot down on the ground. If it feels right to you, you might try lifting that back foot, squeezing it towards your butt. And if it feels right to you, you might take your right hand, bring it behind you, and see maybe you can catch hold of that left foot, maybe not. But just moving in a way that works for you, not worrying about achieving anything other than noticing what is present for you right now. You might think about ease versus effort. Make sure you're finding a balance between the two. So if you find yourself unable to breathe freely, maybe see if there's a way to bring a little more ease into the posture. And then if you have hold of that back foot, let it go, bring it back down to the ground. Come back to center. Start to lift your hips up and back a little. And start to straighten your front leg as much or as little as feels right. So you're just looking for a stretch in that front hamstring. And if at any point you find that holding in stillness is causing you anxiety or stress, you can bring movement into whatever we're doing. And you can also opt to skip anything we're doing and go back to doing something that you actually enjoy. So if there's a pose that we try that is something that feels like really great in your body today, you could spend all 45 minutes doing that. That would be awesome. So if you're still holding this half Hanumanasana, half split, you can bend through that front knee, come back into your low lunge, and make your way back into a kneeling position. However that works for you. And if you're feeling quite a bit of sensation in your body, you might pause and just take a few deep breaths. So if you have blocks, you can have those in hand. If you don't have blocks, that's fine. You don't need them. You can just kind of do the same thing, but without blocks. But if you have blocks, grab them. And then start by rolling your right shoulder back and then rolling your left shoulder back. So you're in this kneeling position. And if kneeling doesn't work for you, you could transition to seated or standing as well. But you're just kind of doing the same movement that we began earlier with. And then if it feels right, you might transition into that sort of backstroke. And if you have your blocks in hand, place your block down behind you to one side of your leg or foot. And then do the same with the other one. And then continue on with this, either rolling your shoulders or trying this backstroke movement. And if you have blocks, you might be reaching back and just tapping the block. If you don't have a block, you might imagine there's a block behind you. You roll your arm back and tap it. Roll the other one back and tap the other block. Or maybe you have a cat in the room and the cat is taking the position of the block. See if there's a way to make this movement actually feel good. And if it doesn't feel good, is there a way to make it feel useful? So maybe could you feel a stretch anywhere? Do you feel any part of your body working or warming up a little bit? And as you're moving from your shoulders, moving your arms, notice what else is moving. So your body is twisting. Where are you feeling that? Maybe through your side body, maybe through your front, maybe through your back, possibly your entire torso. And then once you've evened yourself out, come back to center and just notice what it feels like throughout your whole body. You might take a really deep inhale and sigh it out slowly. And then as you're ready, transition into a tabletop position on hands and knees. If you have blocks, you might place your blocks under your hands. And once you're in your tabletop position, lean your hips back to whatever degree they want to go back, and then send your left hip a little bit out to the side. So you're kind of leaning in a diagonal, maybe feeling a little sensation through that hip. And then come back to center and do the same thing with the right side. So sending your hips back, sending your right hip a little out to the side and back. And you can do that a couple of times on both sides, or you could do it maybe one more time on each side, depending how quickly or how slowly you'd like to move. Maybe you'd like to pause in stillness. But just take another moment to really explore that in a way that works for you. And whenever you're ready, you can come back to center. Take your time transitioning into a seated position. And once you're seated, bring your feet out in front of you and your hands behind you. And then slowly lower yourself down onto your mat so you're lying down. And if you have a pillow, you might place that under your head if that feels useful. And if not, that's fine too. Once you're lying down, pull your knees into your chest. You might find a little bit of movement here. So your knees are up to the degree that it feels comfortable. You might be rocking back and forth a little bit. And then if you'd like to try extending your left leg down onto the floor and straightening that leg out as you hold onto your right leg, go ahead and try that. See what that feels like. If you'd like to extend your right arm out to the side and just drop it down to the floor, you can do that. And then maybe if it feels okay, keeping your shoulders pressed into the mat, you might try bringing your right knee over towards the left to any degree for a little spinal twist here. And one other option, if you'd like to try it, would be to take and turn your head over towards the right to look over your right shoulder. And then as you're ready, you can bring yourself back to center. So if your knee is over to the side, roll it back up. If your head is turned to one side, bring it back to center. And then pull both knees back in. Notice what you're feeling. And if you'd like to drop your right leg down to the floor and try it on the other side, go ahead and do that. Maybe keep your right hand over your left knee. You might extend your left arm out to the side and drop it down onto the mat. And then maybe, if it feels right, you might twist your left knee over towards the right. Maybe take a peek over your left shoulder if that works for your neck. Make sure you're breathing and notice if you're clenching anywhere. Could you possibly let go? Maybe your jaw is clenched. Maybe your forehead is furrowed. You might check in with your neck and shoulders. And then as you're ready, you can unwind. So bring your neck back to neutral, your knees back to center. Maybe pull your knees in for a last time. You might circle your ankles a couple of times. And then set yourself up for whatever version of Shavasana you would like. So you might be lying down in a traditional Shavasana with your arms and legs just kind of flopped out to the side. You might be in any other position that feels comfortable and restful to you today. If you'd like to close your eyes, you can close your eyes. And see if it's possible to just kind of let your thoughts go. So as thoughts come into your mind, which they always do, maybe you can notice they're there and just let them go instead of following them. And if it's helpful to focus on your breath, you might focus on that. You might also focus on a sound or a sensation. If your mind is wandering, bring yourself back into the present. You might deepen your breath a little bit. You might start to wiggle your fingers and your toes a little bit, find some movement. Whenever you're ready, if your eyes are closed, you can open them. And if you're lying, if you want to transition to a seated position, you can do that. And if you're happy to just stay there lying down, you can do that. Whatever feels right. Wherever you are, if you would like to bring your hands into Anjali Mudra by pressing your palms and fingers together, you might do that. Just take a moment to extend some sincere gratitude to yourself. And if you can't muster any sincere gratitude, try faking it. Choose one reason, big or small, to appreciate yourself. And then just a moment to acknowledge the practice of yoga, which is a vast, enormous practice that began in ancient India and has been so generously shared with the rest of the world. And thank you all for practicing with me today.